Hey everyone, it's nostalgia time once again, and welcome to part 2 of our incredible saga of Windows Whistler upgrade races. So, we continue from build 2463 in this episode, and we're going to do the installs of build 2465, 2469, 2474, 2481, 2485, 2498, 2542, and lastly, the official release candidate 1 build of Windows XP, build 2505, all of which were compiled between March and June of 2001. 2465 was compiled actually on April 12th of 2001. And all of these builds pretty much include some final adjustments. And we can see that in those earlier builds, we could see that the branding still mentions Whistler. But as we get closer to the final release, beginning with build 3781, we can actually see that the branding has been updated to now mention Windows XP, indicating that XP is the final name chosen for the next release of Windows. And I am not sure what these 4 builds are doing, why they're just showing a black screen. Oh. All right. Let's start with 2465. I've already swapped out the hard drives. So quick. Oh, here we go. Now they're all processing. So here we go. F8 to agree to the terms and conditions. Format the file system. Enter to start the installation on them all. And where's the other one? Here we go. Yep. Let's start this one. F8 to accept. And format the space. Same thing here. We got to do it on them all. F8 to agree. All right, this one's ready to go. Enter, agree, and format. All right, they're all going. Now we will just watch them all go. So as we look at the install screens, 2465 is actually the last build to feature those prototype designs, the clouds and everything else, except there is some space in between finalizing installation and the time remaining clock. As we look at the next build, 2469, we can see that the installation experience looks pretty much final. Yeah, exactly like the final release. You can see we have the spotlight, the setup will complete clock, and the installing devices, except the only difference, however, are the text mentions. So those are the only differences in these builds. And of course, we'll see mentions of release candidate 2 and much more as we continue through the development of XP. So there was a missigned file, but that's no big deal. As we can see here on these builds, this boot screen nearly looks final. It says version 2002. And the same goes for this one. Over here to 2502. Yep, same boot screen as I just mentioned, with the 2002 branding. And over here, 2505, also with the 2002 branding. You can see on build 2481, you can see that boot screen is mostly final, except the only difference is the version 2002 label. But otherwise, that's really the only change there is. And on 2474, there actually is a very different boot screen here. You can see that's the same boot screen we've had throughout the whole entire saga. And in one of the builds, it looks like we actually do have the proper title.wma sound. However, the animated question mark doesn't look to work. Yep, the question mark is final. Same in this build too. These two are still registering components. I'm here to help you set up your computer. So I guess it just waits for the animation to finish before, going any further. And I believe 2484 is supposed to have a different thing. So here's the... See, the out-of-box experience on all of these are pretty much final, if not close to. Oh my god, this is chaos. And there were a variety of boot screens as well. Yep, this who will use this computer thing is final. And I gotta move this over so I can click next and skip. No, don't just remind me every few days to activate. And of course, we will use this computer. And finish. That sound definitely would not be in the final release. Oh my goodness. We'll skip that screen. Oh my god, this is nuts here. No, just remind me every few days. Who will use this computer? No, only remind me every few days to activate Windows. And then next. Again, it's just me that will use this computer. And we'll click finish and finish. And I think that's the last one. Wow, that was a lot of out-of-box experiences I had to go through. Anyway, as you pretty much saw through all of this, pretty much the welcome screen on here is final. As you can see, yeah, you see right there, that welcome screen, that is absolutely final in this build. And of course, we still get the Windows 2000 sounds. But of course, later on in the cycle, we would eventually get the final sounds. However, they would be disabled by default until a little later on. Those would be disabled by default. However, we would eventually get those full time later on, and especially in the final release. So, as we can see here, the default wallpaper has actually been changed to the Windows logo. What looks to be CGI Windows. And those are the final sounds. And what build did that end up on? That was build 2481. They have the final, I don't think it's that one. It's probably some other build too. But one of these builds, probably the release candidate, that one has the final build, the final sound. But we can see everything here is pretty much final, pretty much finalized in their final design. And of course, pretty much everything looks final. You can see the start menu coming open automatically. I'm gonna try to move all this around. Try to show as much of this as I can here across this pretty scrunched display. But you can see here that the Luna look, yep, that's final. However, that flower is still a prototype. We open up the system properties on 2502. We can see that that monitor icon there is also final. But let's go through each of them one at a time as they all complete. So let's start with build 2474, which has actually just loaded. Now this was actually the first build that introduced the final Luna theme. However, the boot screen was actually much different than the final release. The final logo is there, however, instead of the progress bar, it said loading in very small text, and it would just, I think it would blink or flash. But otherwise, pretty much the OS is looking rather complete. Because if we open up again the system properties on this build, here's 2485. When we open the properties menu up on that, again, there's the final XP monitor. Again, with the XP logo that would be in the final release. And let me pull the desktop properties up now. And on this build, I'll also open up the control panel. That sound is definitely not final for sure. But you can see the screensaver doesn't work in this build. Oh, it does, but it just won't show in the display. So this is how the screensaver would behave in the final release, with the Windows XP logo going at random places across the screen. The control panel in this build here, 2485, does look pretty final. And again, that talks about .NET Passport. Wouldn't come up on a big window in the final release. And this would be the last build that has this file bug report program, which I believe is a shortcut. And there actually, I believe, is a updated concept tour. But actually, the tour animation is final, but rather the music sequences, I believe, is not. Now that is final, that message box. And we'll open up the Windows directory. And just like in those previous builds of Whistler, we go to tours, and we will find there's either an HTML tour or a Macromedia Flash tour. Now, it behaves just like the final tour version, because when you open it for the first time, you're actually given two options. You can either view the HTML document, or you get this nice animated tour, and I'm not sure what these are. I'm pretty sure these are scripts. Yeah, these look like scripts to me, so. And then here is the flash animation. Goes full screen like the final release.
Welcome to Windows XP from Microsoft, the new version of Windows that brings your PC to life. Experience the best. Experience Windows XP. Safe and easy personal computing. Windows XP makes personal computing easy and enjoyable.
Well, yeah, so that's the concept tour in this build, and of course there's individual Shockwave file tours as well. And then here's a different version of that comments thing. This is their form. That's the form where you submit bugs as, XP nears completion of development. But at this point, the whole development of this whole thing is almost complete. But in this build, there's actually something a little interesting here. If I hold down Shift, and I don't think it'll let me, as the standby button is grayed out because it doesn't have ACPI functionality. But if you hold down Shift, the standby button will actually become hibernate. So we will have to hibernate the system from the task manager. We can go to shut down, but I can also see that that option is grayed out. I'm guessing it only works on suitable hardware. But in this particular build, there actually is a fake window on a blue background with the Luna theme, and that's the hibernate animation or screen, whatever. But same ordeal. Going back to 2485, we can see that the control panel here is pretty much final, but we can see the final taskbar display is also there. But here, the default wallpaper, as I said, is not that Bliss background. It's actually a, I guess, logo wallpaper. I don't know what to call it. Now, just like in the final release, there would actually be two different variants of this background. The blue variant, which you're seeing now, is for the professional edition, and then there would be a green background that would be for the home edition. And on the final boot screen, there would actually be the same color combination, but in the progress bar. Blue for professional and green for home edition. However, these would only be seen in the original release to manufacturing build and Service Pack 1, as in Service Pack 2, those color combinations would be dropped, and it would just say Windows XP on the boot screen with the blue loading bar for all editions. This is most likely because Microsoft had been creating several other editions for Windows XP and wanted to make the boot screen consistent across every single boot screen. I believe the banner on here is also final as well. You can see version 5.12485, so that is the final boot screen in this build, but we can see everything here is pretty much coming together. But the only difference here is that quick launch is disabled and the taskbar is locked by default now. However, let's show a few accessories here. If we go to Microsoft Paint, let's just see what it looks like here. So as we continue through these builds, we can see everything is pretty much complete. We can see that this is set on the pencil by default. So still we can draw with the pencil. A really crappy scribble. And it doesn't look like there's any sound though. But I believe we can go to sound properties and we can see the sound scheme that was applied. Because on one of these builds I heard the final sounds. And the movie maker here, I believe, is looking complete. Pretty much complete in this build. And going to sounds and audio devices. And then we go to sounds. Yep, we have the final sounds in this build. So yep, these are the final sounds in XP. And then, of course, we still can play around with Microsoft SAM. And I had a lot of fun with this on XP, especially. I could just copy the letters SOI multiple times, and now we could turn Microsoft SAM into a Rafflecopter. Or imitate his Rafflecopter. Oh, that's great. Maybe we should do that for the end. Just have a whole bunch of Rafflecopters all going at once. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, let's see what we can do here. But first, let's go to the sounds panel. Yeah, that balloon sound is final. But we can see here on this build, and in fact, as we get closer to the end, we see the final builds are starting to, the final sounds are starting to come in. And there's that final screensaver again. Well, I can't interchangeably, switch between these two. I can only do it on one machine at a time. And then if we go to 2498, I can see that boot screen as well. And that click sound is definitely something we would not see in the final release of XP. And if we open up my computer, we will see that, as I said, the Explorer is its final design. So pretty much since we're nearing the end of the development cycle, pretty much everything in this OS is looking rather complete. However, they're just putting on the finishing touches and patching some final bugs, and then the OS would eventually be ready to ship. However, actually, the final release to manufacturing build was compiled in late August of 2001, and then would eventually be released a few months later in October. But then Microsoft really upped their campaign on XP. They gave it the slogan, "You can fly," but after the 9/11 tragedy, they reworded it to say, "Yes, you can." And as you can see here on 2465 and 69, these would be the last builds we would see that boot screen. But what's interesting about here is 2472, if we log off, I don't think you can see it. Yeah, there you go. This is something that did not happen in the final release of XP. The animated Windows flag. Well, on the login screen, that is. But that actually would be implemented in the loading pane of Explorer windows and Internet Explorer especially. And now we can log back in. Otherwise, the new welcome screen is looking very complete. And then if we open up the... Let's actually restart this so we can look at that different boot screen. So we'll click turn off computer here, and we will see the final shutdown menu. Yep, fading to gray, going black and white on the entire background there when this window comes up. Yep, that is final. The faded to XP Professional does look final. The loading text fades in and out. So that's the only modification. I think that's the only build where that boot screen actually is at. But then there's actually another build, 2475, that actually has the same boot screen, but otherwise everything else doesn't look different and is beginning to look final. The build that I'm currently playing around with, 2481, right here. Let's go ahead and finalize the setup of these two builds. So finally the last two to finish, and these would be the last times we would see the Windows codename Whistler logo before they would be switched out to XP. And pretty much by the time we get officially to release candidate 1, all mentions of Whistler would be removed and would now say Windows XP. It was 2481 which updated the boot screen to the final animation that we would see. And then the out-of-box experience screen was updated to now include its final animation. But then in this build, this is where it updates the save to shut down screen. It's on a black background, but still we have that fake window. And then we open up the Tour Windows XP. We will see this window. This is final. This is exactly what I was just talking about. The format selection, where you choose how you want to tour Windows. And I believe in this build we probably have the Windows XP sounds now, but we'll go to sounds, and if we see, we still have the 2000 stuff, but then we can go to Windows default, and I'm just going to tell it no, don't save. Well, maybe I have to click Windows default and then press no, and now here are the new sounds. So those are the final sounds. So in these two builds, it's not on by default. You have to change the sound scheme in order to apply them. But then here, the tour animation, the tour program does look very final.
Windows that brings your experience the best.
Experience Windows XP.
To begin the tour, click any selection.
And we don't have the pinball game on this build, sadly. And once again, this would be the last time we'd see Merlin.
With Windows XP, you get the proven dependability of Microsoft Windows.
And here's the final
enhanced
screen making its appearance in 2469.
Windows XP Professional marks a new standard in business software.
Again, 2485 was what changes the branding, the default wallpaper to the branding. And with the XP sounds now being the default. And then this would be the case going up to the official first release candidate build of XP.
And includes new and enhanced startup time is faster, and your business programs will run
better than ever before. Yeah, for some reason some of these don't even play all the way, like sound effects and whatnot. But the only difference with the animated question mark is that sound effect is not final. And that font is Comic Sans. It's a Comic Sans font. But otherwise, 2465 is actually the last time we will see the concept Luna theme. But actually, it'll be in a more final look. So that checking internet connectivity animation, again, is final. Ready to activate Windows? No. Just remind me every few days. No, we're just gonna... And then on this, the out-of-box music is there, however, it is delayed. And then eventually, once we get past release candidate 1, we will most likely see the final animation video. And once again, we can press no on this page. And then it says we're all finished. And then as 2465 loads up, we again will see the final welcome screen. Yep, again, almost the final welcome screen. I don't think the animated Windows flag was there. But I believe that's only for that, only in build 2474, I believe. That was an exclusive in that build. Because then, sadly, that animation would be dropped on the lock screen, welcome screen, whatever, in the final release. But nonetheless, that was pretty neat to see what Microsoft came up with for the welcome screens. But again, this is the final design, as we can see. Since we're beginning to near the end of the development cycle. But otherwise, then all these builds are gonna look pretty much identical to one another and pretty final. Build 2465 is actually the first build that changes the personal edition to its final name, XP Home Edition. But then, of course, those would eventually be superseded by two separate home editions of Windows Vista, as we will see a little later on here as we start to near the end of the series. We'll see that Vista Home actually was split into two home editions, and the same story would go with its counterpart, Windows 7, particularly Home Basic and Home Premium, with two having very different features and limitations. And then eventually with Windows 8 and 8.1, the Home Edition would be rebranded to Core, and just the Core Edition. And then eventually the Home Edition name would just come back up later as Home. Yep, just Home. In Windows 10 and nowadays Windows 11. But otherwise, that's it. That's pretty much it. We are starting to get closer and closer to the final release. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and end it with Microsoft Sam times 6 doing the Rafflecopter. And so in the next episode, we're going to continue on with this incredible saga, and we're going to move on to the official release candidate 2 build of XP. We're going to begin our journey to release candidate 2, and then eventually we'll work our way towards the final release to manufacturing build. So, still got a little ways to go, but we are getting there. So until next time, take it away, Sam, and we'll see you in